In wisdom gathered over time, I have found that every experience is a form of exploration.
My photography is a reflection which comes to life in action and leads to meditation. Hey, welcome to the Street Shots Photography Podcast. This is Antonio.
And this is Ward.
And this is episode 196 for the end of November 2023. And yeah, so I survived Thanksgiving.
You did.
I shouldn't say that. I had a really good Thanksgiving. Yeah. I got to hang out with Elizabeth's family.
That's great.
Yeah, it was good. And it reminded me that I've got family.
Mm-hmm.
You know, still.
That's great.
Yeah, I've known these people for a long time, and being with them was like, even though Elizabeth's not there, it was like she was there again a little bit. So I wasn't expecting that. I was, kind of thinking be a typical Thanksgiving. I don't even know what that means. Also, it was my birthday too.
Right, the day of the hit. Right. It was the same
every
days.
now and then. Yeah, every now and then my birthday falls on Thanksgiving. And that was always fraught with a little bit. Well, now it was fraught with a little bit of sort of negative predictions of how I deal with it, because Elizabeth would always make me a cake for my birthday and we'd have Thanksgiving. So it was okay. It was fun, but it was fun to hang out with my family. And I brought my Polaroid camera and I took Polaroids just like the old days.
The old days. That's right. And they attracted attention with the crowd, I'm sure.
It did. Of course, I had to here, look at the picture. Now I got to stick it back in my pocket for development. Yeah. Polaroid's new processing, or the new processing on the Polaroid takes like 10 minutes now for it to get fully processed. And they do tell you to don't put it in a book for at least a month, like to let the chemicals settle down or something like that. So
okay.
Don't put it
all
in
the outgassing and all the stuff that the chemistry needs to do.
Yeah, it's very important, outgassing on Thanksgiving.
Well, it's important.
Oh, sorry, that's bad. All right. Anyway, how are you?
I'm doing pretty good. We've been away from the snow. The pavement has been dry, and it's been getting up to the 50s still here. It's cooled off a little bit, but it's actually not that bad. It's been...
Is that abnormal?
Been hanging on. Yeah, usually we have snow on the ground. It tends to want to stay by this time in November.
Yeah, I guess nobody's really complaining about it, but I can imagine it's just not.
But then it will snow. We'll get some slippery conditions, and then people complain it's winter. Yeah, it's winter in Canada, people.
Yeah.
Deal.
Isn't that where winter was invented?
Winter was invented in Canada and Russia, I think, simultaneously. Yes.
We had different kinds of.
That's right.
Different kinds of winters imported and exported to different lands and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. Well, I'm glad that you're, I'm both concerned because of the world, but I'm glad that it's comfortable for you.
They're getting snow, pretty serious snowstorms just north and west of you. In Ontario, they had a big dump of snow.
Yeah.
But not here, so we're good.
Yeah. Well, good. So, what else have you been up to? You've been a working guy?
I've been a working guy. Yeah.
Yeah.
Still settling into my new job. I'm still a steep part of the curve, but that's okay.
All right.
I don't know. I like the people and I like the work, and so things are good that way for sure.
Yeah, and we were talking about this offline a little bit. How we're getting settled into the season in terms of photography. Like it's not always the greatest time for some of us. I don't like to go out in the cold and freeze with my camera, and you're busy and stuff.
I'm busy, and I don't work downtown anymore, so the opportunity is not really there, right? So like we had talked on the last show, I had just gone out with my son to take some pictures downtown.
Yeah,
and I had just posted it around the time that the show came out. So, so I'd like to do that again soon. We've got 2 twin lens reflexes in our family, and I've got film in the fridge that I was reminded of this evening.
It's like, are you going to
It's
use
like
that?
it's in here with the butter. Like, you know,
Yeah.
it's you gotta go out at some point. So
I've heard that before. Elizabeth would tell me, you got all this film in the freezer or fridge. Are you going to, especially near Thanksgiving, are you going to move it out? So I'm like,
yeah.
yeah. Film in the fridge. Yeah, I have to store the Polaroid film in the fridge now, but then I've got room because I don't have that much food in my fridge these days.
Right.
So
These aren't this 4 rolls. You know, they
four
can go
rolls
in
doesn't
with
take
the butter and the cheese. Come
four
on.
rolls of 120. That doesn't
4
take
rolls
much.
are 120. I know, but they're just there and they're not food apparently. You know?
You
So
can't
that's
eat them.
enough. No.
Oh, sorry. I'm just thinking of it. You could sit there and start munching on the empty box or something like that.
Well,
Well,
okay.
yeah, use it up. Use it up. That's what the film is for.
And I really want to see, you know, my 26-year-old son operate a twin lens. This would be his first film camera.
You're going to take pictures of him doing that. I mean, you should.
Oh, sure. Well, I'll do the digital pictures of him. We only have
Yes.
12 frames each, so
Yeah.
we'll really he'll learn. Well, he's actually pretty good. His economy of images when he goes out to shoot is actually quite stunning compared to me.
Mm.
He might work for an hour or 2 hours and come back with 12 frames, 15 frames.
Wow.
Like
Okay.
he is careful.
Okay.
So I will give him credit, but using a film camera for the first time, we really have to worry about exposure.
Yeah, I was about to say, do you have a light meter?
So I'll give him the Sheikah Mat 124, and it has got a meter built in. So
Yeah.
124G, right? The original last generation of those.
It still works.
It still works.
sensitive to light?
It's
Yeah.
accurate. Yeah. And I got batteries. I bought it from a guy actually in our Beers and Cameras group. I bought it from him, and he gave me a cache of batteries. And the meter seems to line up fine with what was my old hand meter, so I still trust it. And then, you know, my son can use the light meter on his phone or whatever, just to get him in the ballpark. And then I've got a Rolleicord, a Rolly, fantastic little 3.5 f3.5 80 millimeter. It doesn't have a meter on it, but that's fine. I'll
copy
deal
what he's doing. Yeah.
So it should be a lot of fun. Get out there.
Well,
Do some shooting.
I mean, I'd like to think about going out there with the twin lens reflex and then, having a light meter around your neck, and it looks like you're straight from the, early 60s or something like that.
Yeah.
It's just a nice look.
Well, I know that Vivian Meyer walked downtown Calgary, so I can do the same. We can pretend we're walking in her footsteps, and she had a Rolleiflex, right? So could
I wonder what happened
pretend.
to her camera. Yeah. Well, yeah. Actually, speaking of Vivian Meyer, that time period, just to get into stuff right now, we're recording a couple days after the death of photographer Larry Fink. And I wanted to acknowledge that in the show, and I also wanted to acknowledge my embarrassment. I don't know his work as well as I think I ought to have.
Me neither. I mean, it's true. I mean, I had known the name, but I didn't have any of his books, and I went through his projects, and he was very prolific. Like from, I don't know when his earliest work was, but it went as late as 2015.
Yeah,
I think was his last project.
Yeah, I think I saw a photograph of his from 2019 someplace as well. But he was born in 1941 in Brooklyn. So, Brooklyn takes credit for another photographer in the world. But he has quite a body of work and quite a history. And I did want to acknowledge that. And it would be nice to do a deep dive on him. Because
his work is very interesting in a graphic way, and the way he covers people typically very close. It seems like very close, middle of the frame.
Yeah, he's an in-your-face photographer. Also, a lot of flash work.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know why I thought like he was more of a street photographer, but I don't think he is. He's really documentary or getting into deeper stories of stuff. And One picture that I do recognize of his is a photograph of Malcolm X. It was photographed at a podium, and Malcolm X is at the bottom of the frame, and there's this sort of big building in the back, and I recognize that picture. And again, I've always not been good with names and pictures for the most part. Sometimes, so I might see a picture that I really like, but I don't ever remember the photographer.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm really, I'm drawn to the image. But I was looking at some of his at Fink's work, and there's this great shot. I put it in the show notes. I'll put it in the show notes for us, but I'll put it for the our regular show notes that he took in front of. Was it the factory, Andy Warhol's factory, the Humble Gents Social Club, and it's Andy Warhol and a few of his compatriots. I don't know by name. And when I ended up, it's a black and white outdoor street shot, like in front of this social club.
Yeah.
And it really made me laugh because the way my eye circled the image, it ended up. I looked at the brighter people on the left, and I sort of circled around and saw the window, and then this person coming out of the basement, and then Andy Warhol's sort of dead center, and then I go from his face down, and Andy Warhol standing in a barrel.
Yeah,
I don't know what that, and there was just something about that trip that my eye took, and ended up with Warhol, and then seeing the barrel, and then for some reason the whole thing made sense to me, or didn't make sense to me, and it made me laugh, but.
Yeah. And then there are these kind of ornamental geese that are beside him in the window frame.
In the window, right, which just adds to this whole,
surreal
image. But there's a lot of pictures like that in Fink's portfolio and his books. I mean, there's really some great moments that he captures in many different situations. His boxing, he did one whole project on boxing, which boxing lends to making really beautiful photography. So I do look forward to diving in more to his work, and I'm, somewhat embarrassed that I don't know it more, but it's always great to discover a photographer for the first time, or just to really decide to go into his work. So I did want to acknowledge his passing. A lot of people are posting on the Facebook groups and stuff like that he died, and some people that I know probably met him. He's a New Yorker. He was on the faculty of Bard College since the late 80s. But he's been in a lot of the colleges and he's had teaching in the Cooper Union and Parsons, New York, NYU. So he's, a New Yorker here, all the way through in some way. So a couple of Guggenheim fellowships in the late 70s. So anyway, cool. Yeah. So he left a great body of work, and I'm sad to hear of his passing. But we're all better off for having him had been around. So
very good. Yeah, I'm with you.
Yeah. So we'll put him on the list of. I need to buy some of his books, but I'll put him on the list of people we would like to take a deep dive on. I really, I'm interested in some of his the social, the vanities, like one of his books about the vanities, these parties and that he would photograph, socialites and that kind of stuff. So
I like how some of his subjects are like deathly aware of the camera and others are oblivious.
Yeah.
And especially to the kind of off center feeling, emotional feeling in the image,
and especially because in these types of shots, he's like full camera, flash on camera, right? Mm-hmm. It's pretty obvious he's taking the picture, and he, like I said, he gets into people's faces. There's a New Yorker article on his. He did a photo shoot with Governor Jerry Brown. And the opening picture, he's got what I think is like a Panasonic Lumix stuck into Jerry Brown's face, like 10 inches away. It's a really funny picture of him. And but when you see the picture of Brown, you can see what he's going after. So yeah, he's right in the face. And actually, that picture looks like it was 2018. So yeah, that that project was more recent than not. So
Yeah.
it's nice to see. The thing I like about this is that, you know, he's this older guy who's still working. You know, he's still a photographer.
Mhm.
And, you know, I come across ordinary people who are not photographers and saying, well, when are you going to retire? You're going to retire? I'm like, I don't know what the hell retiring means.
Yeah.
As a photographer, you don't really retire unless you just can't physically do
You
it
can't
anymore.
physically do it. Yeah.
And even to that extent, you know, I know Martin Parr was in a wheelchair for a while. That didn't stop him from photographing, you know. So it's nice to see an older guy going for as long as possible at doing the thing he loves, and really and still being really good at it. So
Yeah. Well, it keeps you going too. I mean, something to look forward to. I mean, even at our less advanced age, not by much. Just the things to look forward to going out and shooting, to looking at the images, to importing them, to processing them, to posting them. Like there are steps along the way. That's the part of the process, or the actual craft part of it I really love, which is what keeps me going.
Yeah. And you know, still for me, the craft is fun. I still like the technical geeky part of it as well.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I'll ever get past that. And speaking of that, I've got a couple of technical geeky beefs or something.
Oh, here we go.
Here we go. Sorry, there's a segue into this, but figured, I could take the segue. It's not really a beef, but you know, the Sony's came out with their new whatever the new camera is, I don't know, is it
the one with the global shutter, A9 III?
We have the global shutter, and we have the 120 frames per second thing, right? And you know, of course, my bias, or I shouldn't say my bias, my introduction to this is through everybody and their brother on YouTube talking about this is the global shutter and the 120 frames, and this is what 120 frames per second sounds like, and blah, blah, blah. And of course, everybody's, you know, getting themselves in their, you know, into a twist about this camera, and it's great. You know, new technology is always exciting to me and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And the global shutter thing, you know, whatever. I don't know if that means anything to me, and maybe it means more if you're doing video than photography. But, you know, again, doing fine with what I've got. So, sure, great. Push the technology.
It's a technical milestone. It's in a commonly available, if you want to call it that, camera. It's a harbinger of things to come.
It is. Fine. It's great. The thing that's getting me, and this is rant on for a minute, is this 120 frames per second thing. and the tinfoil hat part of me says that camera manufacturers are in cahoots with hard drive manufacturers, you know, and
I see. When there's lots of pictures to take, there's lots of pictures to store.
Exactly, and certainly there is a need for some photographers in certain circumstances, maybe many photographers in certain circumstances, where that would be a benefit. 120 frames per second, sure, right. That's great, but everybody else who's going to get it, or who's going to start using that as a benchmark to saying, well, does your camera do 120 frames per second? I remember when I used to have a film camera and I put the battery drive on the back of it, you know, I could do 3 frames you know, my FM2 could do 3 frames a second, but when I got to my Nikon F3 and I put the battery drive, I could do 6 frames for, you know, I can go through a roll of film in 6 seconds, which is, you know, pretty cool and really expensive after a while. But you know, this 120 frames per second has me just thinking, like, well, first of all, where's the limit on this? Mm-hmm. And what are people setting themselves up for in terms of, well, storage is obviously an issue, although this is a 26 megapixel camera, so the files aren't gigantic.
Right.
But you've got 4 times as many as you probably, you know, ever need. And how are you going to edit those pictures? Mm-hmm. Like, how are you going to decide between frame number 110 and 111, right? Like, where is that process going to do? And then are you going to really spend time deleting frame 110 and 109 and 108. You can actually go through all that when you've got this giant burst. And I'm just thinking that people are just setting themselves up for a lot of sitting on their butts in a computer, staring at a screen, doing pointless things.
Yeah.
So I don't know what you think about it, but this was my,
Well, and then, I only really see it in
8 terabyte
sports.
Drives.
Yeah, I only really see it in sports where there's, I'm thinking of, I don't know, pole vault or the 100 meter dash or these things, or horse racing or something where you want to have 100. For me, 120 is simply overkill. Like 20 or 30, I think.
But even with the sports stuff, you would still have this. How are you going to choose between those 2 frames or those 3 frames? Like, what is going to be that criteria? And then you're going to have to spend time looking at it.
I don't know.
I don't know. That's what I'm saying. It's like there's going to be so little. At this point, you might as well get a movie camera. I mean, I remember a while back when the first Red camera came out, and I was working with someone who asked me, "Do you think it's possible to lift frames?" This is before we could take still pictures automatically when you're doing video. He said, "Could you think you could take still frames from the Red and upsample them to make a still picture? So this way, someone who's doing stock video production can do 2 things at the same time: do stock video, and then have frame grabs to have a single frame for a stock photo that was from the same take, which had a lot of value." I was able to do it. It was a 12 megapixel raw frame from a Red. I can't remember what the Red was. It was one of the first Red cameras that came out. Now we've flipped the tables around. Like, you're doing, 120 still frames a second. Well, you can make a short video from that, an incredibly high resolution video. Anyway, it's just something that I thought, like, why, and I'm going to sound like an old guy who's like, what do I need this stuff for? But where's the upper limit to this? Like, why don't we get better megapixels? Why can't we get all these other features in the cameras that we can use? I mean, Brooks Jensen in the latest, one of his latest Lens, what's the name of his
Lenswork.
show? Lenswork podcast was talking about this desire for having other features on cameras, like, things that we can do on our smartphones now. Why can't we do on our regular cameras? And I agree with him. Like, why couldn't we add notes or have GPS? Like GPS, why can't we have a GPS built in on every camera without having to have a stupid connection with our? So it's all this other stuff. And 120 frames per second is probably good for like a small amount of photographers.
Yeah.
Very specific kind of things. It's scientific. I can imagine there'd be a lot of good scientific things to do with it as well. But for ordinary people like you and me and stuff like that, I just didn't see that. And again, I thought, well, there's your way to spend more money on, 16 terabyte hard drives or 32 terabyte hard drives. You're going to be storing all this stuff. Anyway, that was my little bit of a rant. I wanted to get that out and make everybody else suffer.
No, that's fine. Well, there has to be a downside to all this fancy technology.
Well, but that's the thing is nobody's saying
better
that
and
there's
worse.
a downside. Nobody says that nobody, but the side of like, let's do all this great, crazy stuff with the cameras and not saying, well, the Jurassic Park, what's his name, saying, engineers, spending their time thinking, we can do this, and not saying, should we do this or whatever, yeah, I don't know.
Not that we could, but if we should have.
If we should, yeah, exactly. Eric Gold, not Eric. I'm really
Jeff Goldblum.
Jeff Goldblum. Eric Goldblum. This is what happens when we record late at night, right?
Well, we'll be fine.
I don't have any coffee in me to do that. Anyway, so yeah, good on you, Sony, for coming out with this great camera. The sensor sounds really interesting, and this global shutter sounds fascinating. Sure, okay. The high speed sync with I think the plus about that is going to be with flash. You won't get those weird kind of flashes.
It'll be like a leaf shutter camera.
Be a leaf shutter camera. That's fine. That's great, because that's what we should have been. That's what we should have had.
Yeah.
With cameras now we're getting to the place where cameras sensors will be like film or film shutters. Great. That's wonderful. 120 frames per second. Sure. All right. go look at their investments in Western Digital and Synology and stuff like that, and see where Sony's investing their money. It's going to be in hard drive companies. Yeah, SanDisk too. Buying lots more cards. All right, tinfoil hat off.
Alrighty.
Next thing, right? The thing I wanted to talk about last episode, but we didn't because we ended up talking about something else. So let me get my notes here so I can read exactly what I wrote to you. But
so we're bringing ancient philosophies into our workflow. Is that what we're doing here?
That's what we're doing, all right? And this came from my friend and neighbor and probably fellow listener. I think he listens to our show now. And then you met him when he was here, my friend Ed.
Mm-hmm.
We were doing our morning walk, and he was telling me about the I Ching and how he was using it to give him some ideas about his work. And I had forgotten about I Ching. I remember a long time ago, and it might have been high school or junior high school, and I was always trying to figure out my life and finding out, mystic ways of getting questions answered, just like an angsty teenager might,
Mm-hmm.
Is this girl going to fall in love with me? How am I going to do, whatever. But I remember I Ching being part of that, and I haven't really thought about that in a long time. So we were talking about his usage of it as a reflection of himself to try to to sort of answer his own questions about work. And I thought as we were talking, it dawned on me about this was also before my talk at the coffee shop, my photo talk a couple of weeks ago. So I was in the process of doing that talk, writing it, getting it together. And so I had to spend a lot of time looking at my own pictures and reflecting on them and trying to figure out what the heck I was doing with them. And what am I going to talk to people about? But then it struck me that what would be interesting to do something with my own photography, my own photographs, my own library of photographs in a similar way of the way you would what am I coming with the way you would not access? Why can't I think of the words? Am I losing my words tonight?
Well, the way you interpret the images?
The way you would the I Ching. Let's go back. Let's go backwards here. So okay. Do we know what the I Ching is? Is that a yes or no?
I don't know everything about it. I mean, I know reading the notes about what the steps are, but the depth, the original origin of it, I don't know from.
So I'm going to read what I have from a website so that I don't get this wrong, because I don't want to interpret, right? The I Ching is one of the oldest. I can't remember where I got this from. I don't know where I got it from. Sorry, so I can't attribute it. But the I Ching is one of the oldest and most spiritual books in the world, and coupled with the Tao Te Ching, it makes up the fundamental sacred teachings that command a special place in all Taoists' hearts. The I Ching is essentially a means of obtaining spiritual guidance, inspirational insight, and universal wisdom. It can help with personal development or provide encouragement in finding authentic understanding and solutions to the questions or decisions that are of importance to you at any given time or situation. This is the simplest thing I can come up with. And essentially, it's a book of writings in set up in what are called histograms, not histograms. I'm locked in there. Hexagrams. And essentially, you're choosing random numbers, and then you're referring to these hexagrams where there's information and wisdom, which you then access in relationship to a question perhaps that you've posed to yourself before you access this, and you get an interpretation. And this is really, I'm probably butchering this one. I'm trying to come up with as simple as possible sort of understanding. Mm-hmm. And, some people might say it's spiritual or it's, in touch with the divine or whatever. Not it doesn't have to be that. And it could be that too, as well, whatever you're looking at. But the idea of accessing sort of ancient wisdom to sort of look and reflect upon your own questions and desires and ideas and stuff like that. And I think it's just like a giant, very smart mirror in some way. And so I'm probably doing a disservice to the I Ching. So please forgive me for any of the people who are really into that. But I'm trying to make this simple as and relate it to what we were talking about, photography. So I thought, in terms of photography, maybe instead of using a 3,000-year-old text, what if we used our own visual library as a starting point for guidance or reflection, right?
Okay.
So, and like I said, this is coming up because I was starting to look at my pictures for this discussion that it was this talk I was giving at the Blue Star at my cafe where I'm having my show. Mm-hmm. And, because I haven't looked at my body of work that closely in a long time, but I had to put coherent thoughts and ideas and concepts to what I was doing with the photos. And I thought, well, it'd be really interesting to look at my own pictures and try to access some thing that's in them that would reflect back to me in terms of thinking about my own work, maybe projects I want to work on, about anything. So what do you think of that? And the name we came up for this, which I'll name it for the show. What was I going to call it? Photomancy, right?
Photomancy.
Sort of like, the mancy part is the sort of the magical part in photo being photography.
Right. So you had just asked me what I think about it. I'm always trying to think of ways to move my creative work forward. And I seem to like to sit around and wait until I get struck by lightning with some kind of inspiration. I saw this thing, I got to go after it. Or I saw this thing, now I can't really exactly do that, but I'm going to go, this direction and try this sort of thing. A different kind of lens, a different lighting, a different locale, just something to change things up. What I've read so far of this, I think is outstanding in terms of the value it'll offer you looking at your own work, using it as a kernel of inspiration, doing this exercises, which you'll be getting into, to help decide, not just interpret your current work, but give you a kind of a rich idea what you could possibly do next. And that can always be with you because it doesn't require an external source to hit you in the side of the head to get you to get motivated. So I think there's great value in this.
And let's go into some of the stats. I've already done this once, and I did it only a couple of weeks ago because I was doing it for the show. I haven't had time to get into it, but I just pulled it out. But by the way, I'm doing this in my photo journal, which I think is actually a great place. We talked about this a while back, but this place where I'm printing pictures and putting them in there and then writing about them. I thought this was a good place to also place these photographs that I want to have sort of a reflection on in an I Ching way, photomancy way, photomantic. I don't know how to say that. So let me talk about the practical parts first.
Okay.
All right. So in the I Ching, you're either choosing coins or you're doing something that creates a random number, and then you're referring to these hexagrams in a book, and then you're reading. So I thought, well, how would we do this in our own photo library? And there's a bunch of ways. The first thing I thought of is first being able to find a way to randomly generate a number, which you can find any place. There's apps and there's things.
Random.com.
Random.com.
Random.com. Give it a number between X and Y, and then it'll give you a number.
Oh, well, there you go. And what are you using that number for? So what I was trying to do is I was using my Lightroom library. And if you have Lightroom Classic, there's a way to set up Lightroom Classic in the view menu so that you can see your thumbnails of your pictures, and they'll have a giant number on them, sort of a faded number. And so, if you choose an album or a gallery, you'll have, if you have 100
or
pictures,
a year folder. That's what I would
or a
do.
year folder. Oh, that's interesting.
Oh,
well,
yeah.
yeah. Okay. Let's talk about this. But whatever you use, let's just, and then however many pictures you have, you set up the random generator to choose between however many pictures are in that gallery or album or year folder. And it generates a number, and you go down the line, look for the picture that corresponds to that number, and choose that picture, right? Before we go into further things, let's talk about the galleries and stuff like that. This is really interesting because you and me were talking a little bit about you could do it with your entire photo library, or you could do it with specific galleries or selections of pictures, which would skew your results in some way. Because let's say for me, I've got a giant photo gallery and library in Lightroom. Right now it's over 1 million images. I mean, a lot of them are similars and stuff like that, but that's a lot of data. And I could set up a random generator to do all my pictures from 1998 till now, which is interesting to do. Or I could start to choose specific galleries, which have lesser amounts of pictures in them. And you had something to say about this. I can't remember. Didn't you say something about using specific galleries?
Well, if you wanted to pick something, a project that you really liked that you wanted to expand upon.
Right. So a project that you already have.
They already have where I have run, this has run its course. What can I do next? And use this project that you really loved as a jumping off point to do the next thing.
Yeah. So it would be interesting that you could do this with different galleries and different kinds of ideas to like you said, to spark a jumping off point. If you use a larger, fuller, library of pictures, you might come across some random picture that you don't even remember taking. And that could bring up a whole bunch of different ideas when you sit down to write about it. But the process would be first figure out the question that you want to ask, right? And again, without getting all woo woo about this, right? This is which some people might say, they might have already stopped playing this because once they talk about consulting a book of ancient text for wisdom, some people just turn it off. But anyway, what kind of actually, I'd be curious what kind of questions you might sort of ask for. But the idea is to have that question in mind first before you start looking for a random number of pictures. So, some generic questions I came across in terms of the I Ching would be like, what if I took this path? Which way? How am I going to do this? What if I tried this? How can I change my reaction to this? There are other things in terms of photography that you could specifically say, and I'll read mine. I'll actually read mine a little bit later. But like I said, how can I find purpose at being a photographer? That was a very big question to ask. I don't know what you would ask. What would be the kind of questions you might?
Well, how could I explore this? I mean, the way I'm thinking of it, and the picture you're painting is sort of like, I think of it from project point of view. I mean, yes, the whole random thing of all the pictures I took in 2019, whatever, 40 some thousand. That would be an interesting, maybe a weekend project or what I can do. But I was thinking of the use case I was thinking of was there's this project I really like. I'm kind of at a standstill right now. I would like to go in a different direction. I'm saying I want to go down a different path that's related to this. What could I do based on the image that I get, that I draw, and then reflect on that, and then go through the process of reflection to do that. Yes.
And what I like about this idea, rather than what you were saying before about waiting for the random bolt of lightning to hit you, that this is a regimented, thing that you do. Like you sit, you do this numbering, you find the picture, you go through all these steps to try to come to maybe not the answer, but something that's going to help you or spark something, I should say.
Right. And that's all I've ever really needed to do to get something. That it's just what is the right question to ask, right? I talk about it in my work life about troubleshooting.
Mm-hmm.
Part of a good troubleshooter is knowing when, or knowing to ask the right question to start out. And you won't get your answer. You rarely get your answer on the first question, but finding an answer to that question will lead you to the next question. And then at some point, when I'm thinking of it in context of photography, which I like to bathe in, and so do you, is the question that eventually you're going to get an answer, or at least a direction that will be enough motivation and inspiration for you to take the next step and start out with, okay, here's what this next part of the project is going to look like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
And I think it's great too, because, and I've told my friends, my art friends, and I don't think I've really mentioned it here. I'm working on my technique, shooting and so on, and processing, my post work, but I'm without a cause right now. And there are a lot of artists that have a cause, like there's something that they fight for, that their art, they represent this cause through their art. And I'm kind of missing that. And it's kind of like a core inspiration, a core drive. And I think something like this will help a lot, particularly this fall after what, with my aunt dying and so on. Like the questions are getting bigger. The things in life are getting bigger around me. So I have big questions. Maybe that can be reflected in my future projects. So in that way, I'm really interested in this, because I think it might lead to work that has a real meaning, and a cause. The word I use is cause. It's sort of like, what's your primary motivation in it? What
your driving
lights
force?
a buyer?
The driving
force.
force,
Exactly.
Yeah, because we have driving forces, and we've got not restricting forces. There was a word in my
constraints.
Because
I love that word. I love constraints, because that's the main, for me, the main core creativity of photography is working within the constraints of the media that you're working in.
Constraints is good, and the word I was looking for was restraining forces.
Oh, okay.
Right. So the constraints also fits into that, but we have driving forces are things that move us towards our goals, right?
Okay.
We have restraining forces, which are the things that we do that keep us away from moving towards our goals or our cause. Let's say, for instance, constriction. Would you say
constraints? It's like, how narrow is the road, right?
Right. Constraints.
The way is still there. Forward and reverse forces, and then the constraints are the narrowness of the road.
They're not mutually exclusive. You can have constraints and restraining forces too.
Right.
Those are there. So the steps that I sort of came up with were: pose the question or topic, 2, randomly select a photograph, 3, reflect on the photograph. What emotions, memories, imagery, symbolism do you see in the picture? 4, draw connections. Are there things in the picture that you see that you can make connections with within the picture itself? And then 5, you wrote the journal or discuss the insights. I like to write them down, but this is all, I think it's important to be writing it down, not to be doing this in your head.
Right.
Because it's, whether it's writing down in a book or doing it on a, digital thing, it doesn't matter. But just having words that you can then come back to. Those would be the steps I would take to do this. So I'll do the one I did on November 12th. And this is my first one. So, I'm not saying I'm perfect here, but I actually wrote down photomancy number 1. And the question I wrote was, how can I find purpose at being a photographer? Which I think is a big question. And I don't know if it was the right one, but I just thought I would start because better off start. So I went through my gallery of pictures from my neighborhood. So it was a limited gallery of like 1,400 pictures. So I was able to do a random generator, and then I looked at whatever number it was. The number was 1,034, right? And the image, I'm reading it from my book, image from Neighborhood Selects Gallery and Lightroom Classics. So the picture is this shot I took of a cat in a it was at a, like, I thought it was an abandoned store, but it really wasn't, because these cats, there was 2 cats in there and they had food, and there was one of these cats that doesn't have any hair. I don't know what they're called. And the place was a filthy mess, and I felt so bad for these cats, you know. And so I took this picture, and he's looking at me. He's a skinny, hairless cat. There's a bunch of tape on the window. It's through a dirty window, and there's a bunch of junk in the background, and he's just looking at me. And that was, I was like, okay, you know. Oh, by the way, if you're doing this, don't cheat. Okay. Whatever picture that you pick, or whatever number it is, or whatever, like, just go with it. I mean, as much as I looked at this picture, it's like, I don't want to deal with this picture.
Yeah. It's this autofocus outtake when I know 2 frames better, with 2 frames later was better.
Right. Just go with what you get, because therein is the challenge. Although you shouldn't have autofocus pictures in gallery, but anyway, but it doesn't matter. You know,
it's a gallery. I'm just going by my,
well, whatever. I'm just saying, but my thing here is to say, don't cheat. If you're going to do this, do it, go full in, pick the picture and stick with it and see what happens. You may not come up with anything. You may not answer. You may have to put it away and then come back again. But anyway, so when I looked at this picture, I said the feelings I got: fear, uncertainty, isolation, looking through a dirty glass window, cluttered, dying plants, cat with no hair, no protection, neglected, unkempt space, direct stare. Those the first things that came up when I looked at this picture. And I said, there are several purposes at being a photographer: artist, job, documenting. Now I'm focused on the art part. Doing it as a job would also give me a purpose. A few jobs have popped up that maybe I should apply for. I know how much I like to teach. ICP, International Center of Photography, maybe. What do I have to fear? Nothing bad can happen to me. I know I fear isolation and being abandoned. In some sense, I already have been. No fault of anyone. And that's where I stopped. I haven't finished it. So I'm not sure how that answers my question, or if it gets to it, but there's something there. There's a kernel of something there. Although I know the question
a lot for a picture of a cat behind dirty glass.
Yeah. And this is different than what I was talking about, like when we were talking about doing the photo journal. Because to me, the photo journal is also just coming up with pictures that you like and talking about them however you want to talk about them. This is more of a reflection and more of a purpose to find some way to push ourselves in maybe a different direction as being a photographer. And I know what you're saying about a cause. I was like, when you said cause, the first thing I thought was like, well, it's great to have like a project, right? So I'm like doing the thing of my neighborhood, and now I'm kind of done with it, right?
Yeah.
Even though I'm still taking pictures of the neighborhood, like I think that goal of, okay, I got the show and I made the zines and like, that's it. I don't know what else to do. So now what? What is my purpose? What is my purpose as a photographer? What am I going to do now? What's the next goal? What is the next cause? I don't mean to use that word lightly. I apologize if I do. No. Because I know there's a lot of ways to interpret that word. I mean, I always think of that like my photography. Like, who cares about my stuff in the neighborhood when there's all this other important stuff going on? But it's not a way to look at it, I don't think, because I think everything that we do is important. It's just everybody else does something else different. So anyway, I don't know if I'm stepping on you if you want to say anything.
No, it was just, I agree with you completely. So you've got there are a lot of big questions there now. So there's a lot of soul searching there going on. So now that you've written them down and even now that we've discussed it, is there anything that's going through your mind now? Just that now that you're reading them again, is there anything that's going on in your head about what you'll make of these observations that you've made?
Good question.
Just in the the fullness of time since you wrote them down.
Yeah, there's something about the isolation part that I'm sort of hooked on a little bit. I mean, as a photographer, or it's just being me, I'm very used to being by myself, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Me too.
And yeah, and I've had a couple of opportunities, like the photo walk that I did, although there was only a couple of people that showed up. For the Scott Kelby photo walk I did, and it was great to be with other people who are sharing the same, love for what we're doing. And of course, I'm not isolated at that point. I have to be on with other people. Yeah. And even just, doing the photo talk a couple of weeks ago, and having all that interest in first of all, in coming and hear what I have to say, but also my discussion about documenting the history of your neighborhood and stuff like that, and it wasn't really about my pictures, but just using my pictures as a stepping stone. But there was something about that pushing out of being alone, being out of isolation. And even the idea, I think I probably posed in the last episode, which I haven't started yet, is getting a coffee and cameras thing going up in my neighborhood, right? Which is also acting against isolation. So there's something about that. Something about, I mean, even when you came to town, and I don't think I've ever done a photo walk with a friend like I did with you. Not that often. A lot of people say, "Oh, you want to go out and take pictures? Let's go do it." I'm like, "Yeah, sure." I never do it, So anyway, something about breaking out of the isolation. I don't know where that leads to, but it's if I've got a fork in the road that I've drawn up with this picture and this question, and one means less isolation and less, and maybe more connection with other people who like what I'm doing and who share the same ideas and stuff like that. That's probably the road that I might steer in.
Okay.
Is what I'm getting from this. And so it could be a big question with a very simple answer, and maybe how do I get that from this picture? Because some people want to be too literal, like, well, how do you get that from a picture of a cat in a dirty window? And it's like, I don't think that's the point. The point is, where am I taking it in my mind, and where is it going to help me? And so if ultimately this picture of this cat in a window leads me to doing more photo walks, or doing a cameras and coffee thing, and seeing where that goes, then I think this technique is kind of successful, or at least
Well, you did have the feels when you were shooting the cat. I mean, you did have some feelings when you were at the moment that you took that picture, though, right?
It's interesting that one came up, because there's a lot of pictures of things I take that I don't get the feels for, right?
Yeah.
So randomly I pick out this picture. Of course, it's of a cat, so I'm a cat person, right? And the helplessness too. That was the other part of this, because I couldn't go into I didn't write that down, right? I didn't write helplessness. I should write that down, because that was part of this. I'm just gonna write helplessness. Right. Make sure I got that, because I couldn't do anything to save the cat or help the cat. And even though the cat looked like it was okay, I would have not, So anyway, there was a bit of that in there as well. But yeah, I mean, it could have been a shot of a brick wall, and like, what am I going to say about that?
Yeah.
Herein is the challenge. I like this. It sounds like you like it too.
Oh yeah.
I'm really thankful to Ed for helping me spark this idea, and I really, really, really enjoy the idea of looking at my own work and using it as this resource. And we've talked about this a bunch of times, about going back and looking at our work, and without a goal or it's great to look at my pictures, but it's not like flipping through someone else's book. When you look through a book a few times because it's edited and stuff like that. When I look through my own pictures, there's a lot of drudgery in it. And and so having this reason to use this resource, and we all have them. We all have these pictures sitting someplace. I don't know. So it'd be really interesting what I'd like to see what you end
Absolutely.
up doing at some point. So,
Well, I just went back. It's funny you mentioned that. This is sort of an aside, shallower, but I found a couple of pictures from the Stampede. Like they were actually worked out quite well that I should have done post-processing on that just escaped my notice, and I posted them. A little bit of summer heat to help, offset the cooling temperatures. I don't know. But no, I'm definitely all over this. So I'm going to decide on an image. Maybe I should select from those pictures of that weekend I took of those women and see if there's something.
That would be interesting. Yeah. Yeah.
That would be interesting. I don't know that I would, because they haven't really been processed yet. They might be a good place to start to ask the question.
It's interesting. How would you what kind of question would you ask? What are the kind of questions you might ask of yourself when you're doing this? Not saying specifically for this, but like what
well,
comes
no,
up in your
would
mind?
be specific. How would I what is my approach to the subject matter? What is my approach to these people that I photographed? And
okay.
I was very deliberate with the composition, so I would say most of them were, if not keepers, they were strong enough compositions that I should be able to read something out of them.
And how do you see this new idea, this photomancy thing, being different than your usual reflection on your own imagery? Like,
there's a structure around it, a discipline around the process of doing it, as opposed to, even if I'm looking at it and I'm journaling it, because, well, my journal is a little bit different than yours. Mine is I am tracking my process.
Mm-hmm.
So it is not, I don't know. I post, or I on our little printers, those little HP Sprocket printers that we have, the examples that I have kind of set the scene for what the shoot was like that day. Here are some of the images I captured, and the rodeo girls on the show riders with their flags and all going by me at high speed with their juxtapositions, and them taking off past me when I'm shooting them with a long lens. Kind of gives a feeling of things, but not necessarily a deeper meaning or story. And I think if I go through this process, I'll have a better chance at how I'm going to deal with them, because I haven't been looking at those images at all, because I don't know what I'm going to do with them, especially with the gravity with Aunt Rose now that she's gone.
Yeah.
What can I do? And it may be that I will just have to put it off or take pictures of more people or whatever. But I'll go through the process, whatever comes out the other side. I'll certainly let you and everyone else know, because
I'd be curious.
It has become very important. And so,
all right.
Maybe I'm on the cusp of a cause. Maybe I'm,
well, who knows? Yeah. Maybe that would happen. We do a follow-up when we can, a little bit later. I mean, we're all, for us in the Northern Hemisphere, and those of us who don't like to go out and freeze, we're getting into the isolation months. And so, and this is probably a good opportunity to do these things and get us prepared for when we want to go out. And who knows, maybe it'd get you to go out in the freezing cold and do some work.
I've done it. It's, it's fine.
Some of us, it's okay. It depends on the day. But having a reason to go out, or having a goal and a cause to go out for. So I see no harm in doing this, and I don't really see any woo woo in this, because there are things that are going on when you take picture when you're photographing, and it's all inside of us. And I think this is a great way to sort of tap back into, hey, what were you thinking about? What was I thinking about when I was making that picture? And how can I use that as insight to go forward into something new, or even to, revisit something old, I don't think I've heard this being done before. So I'd like to say we're discovering it for the first time. I'll give all credit to Ed.
Yeah. Thanks, Ed.
Thanks, Ed, for giving us the giving me the spark in this, and I'll give us both credit for pushing it a little forward. So I did want to finish. I did find this paragraph just to sort of bookend the I Ching and what it can do, and sort of relate this to our photomancy I Ching photography thing. So again, I'm sorry I don't have the, I cut and paste these things from websites and then I don't put the attribution, but so forgive me. Maybe I'll have it in the show notes. But anyway, let me read this. So referring to the I Ching, you may prefer to think of it connecting to your inner guide or inner compass, intuition, gut feeling, guardian angel, spirit guide, Buddha, God, or whatever concept feels most appropriate to you. To use the I Ching to its fullest, you should approach the text with an open mind without expectation. Allow it to stimulate and broaden your perspective on the situation or change you are encountering. Embrace and respond to it in a way that moves you onto your path of true self-worth. Seek to align with and incorporate the change rather than opposing or blocking it, thus going with the flow, holding your balanced wu wei, no matter how challenging or fearful it may emotionally feel at the time. When you go with the flow in this way, you become more creative and authentic. You begin to let go of past and outdated modes of conditioning and thinking that no longer serve you and your authentic potential. So it follows that if you alter your perception of the present, your future must change. Remember, the ancestor of your current situation is a thought, and the same principle applies to your future. But that was a nice, summary or bookend of the I Ching, and then applying that to what we're talking about with our photography. It sounds like a lot of those, there's a lot of crossover there. There's a lot of ways that we can use it to be more creative. So I think that's worth a try. So my goal and thing is to now that I don't really have anything on the menu plan, I've got a lot of empty time, is to continue doing this and seeing where it comes up. And I'd like to, update everybody as it goes on, as stuff comes up that I find is interesting. We should bring it in here and share it. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm on board.
Cool. All right. Well, I think we got it about covered for tonight.
All right.
What do you think? You think we got it covered?
I'm good. I don't think I have anything more to say.
I have nothing more to say. I'm not done. But I'd actually like to hear if the end. Goodbye. If anybody is into this, that we just discussed, this photomancy, I'm going to call it photomancy just to make it our own. Drop us a note somewhere and let us know. I'd be interested to see what you guys come up with and if you find it interesting or not. I'd rather not just be this circle of me and Ward doing it. It'd be nice to hear other people's experience. So give it a shot and let us know.
Yep.
And that, Ward, where can we find you and send information and hellos and stuff?
Which, by the way, I appreciate the feedback both Antonio and I are getting. Every now and then we get a little shout out from or a DM from our friends in social media. Really appreciate that. Please don't be shy. Antonio and I will respond. We're good guys. We're there for each other. We're there for you. So please don't be shy in contacting us if you like. Just share an observation or what you thought of the show. We're definitely love to hear from you.
Here.
So where are you going to find me? On Vero and Twitter /X, whatever you want to call it. I'm at W Rosin Photo. On Instagram, you can find me at Ward Rosin Fine Art. On Facebook, I'm Ward Rosin Photo. My website is rosin.ca, rosin.ca, and our unofficial sponsor. And I did have a couple of sales. I had a couple of Black Friday sales, even though I didn't have a Black Friday sale. I was at Ornis Photo, ornis.photo. Those 12mm Sony E-mount lenses, I've sold 2 of them. So thank you for that.
You're going to have a Cyber...
I have to have a Cyber Monday. Oh, we just finished Cyber Monday, didn't we?
Yeah, we'll do it again. So, okay, cool.
So, but I appreciate the sales, and
cool.
It's nice. And what about you, Antonio? Where are we going to find you?
Vero and X and Flickr at AM Rosario, Instagram AM Rosario Photo, My website is amrosario.com. Our website, streetshots.photography. Subscribe to us on Substack. I'm behind on putting newsletters out. I've got something in my brain now that I got time. Streetshots.substack.com. I would like you to subscribe because it'd be nice to, put words out in between shows and have somebody, say, hey, these are great. And if you want to support the show, you can buy us a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/Antonio Rosario. So those are the places. I gotta shorten that so that it all times up with the music and stuff at the end here.
All right, we'll just put more sound effects in.
More sound effects. All right, well, that's it. And we survived November. Next is December, and we're coming up. We're going to do our 200th show in January. I was hoping that it would time out to the beginning of the year, but it's not. But sometime in January, 200. But anyway, we're getting there. All right, cool. Well, thanks everybody for hanging out with us, and thank you, Ward, for spending the evening with me.
As usual, my pleasure, my friend.
Yeah, and good night to you, and good night to all.
Good night.